person. But please allow me to just take this opportunity to welcome you all here. I know it's a Friday afternoon. We've all got very busy schedules. You guys could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here today. And so thank you so much for joining us. Really, the intention or the rationale behind these sessions is to bring people together to learn more about what they can do to financially empower themselves. Sometimes I feel, when we talk about finances, it's a very difficult topic. It's uncomfortable. There's so much that, people want to know and don't really have the resources available to acquire that kind of information. So the nature here is that these conversations are really just that. They're conversations, right? They're meant to be robust, interactive, engaging. Please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to, admit. To jump in if there's something you want to know, because really, how often do we have someone or people coming in from industry to come and provide information, financial information. That being said, please also allow me to disclose that nothing that is going to be mentioned here is financial advice. The nature of financial advice is that it's tailored to a person's individual needs. So please don't take this personally, literally. Before we kick things off, of course, it's important for me to just give an acknowledgement of country. We are meeting on Ngunnawal land, and so please allow me to extend my acknowledgement to their elders present and emerging. That being said, there's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like us to go through. Please ensure that your devices are on silent. If you're joining in online, please just make sure you mute yourself. Otherwise, it causes a little bit of feedback with the session. If you have something you want to ask or something you want to know, feel free then to unmute and jump in. For the duration of the session, I will also be monitoring the online chat. So, if there's any questions that pop up online, I'll be there to facilitate that. Regarding bathrooms on campus, the restroom facilities are just outside of the venue. And if you're online, I'm sure you know where your bathroom is at home. And then the next thing I also just want to mention is that since the session is recording, it's going to be recorded. It will be available on YouTube. I know sometimes when, we're immersed in something, there's so much we don't get, and maybe it'll be easier to go back and listen in on it. And then there are a couple of familiar faces who've been coming to these sessions for the past few months. Thank you so much for supporting the Women in Retirement Education Project. For those of you who don't know what Project WIRE is about, is really just that it is a collaboration between women in the industry, financial service providers, financial planners, financial education managers, who have come together to share financial information to anyone that wants to access it. And like I said, because the intention is that this kind of thing should be inclusive and available for anyone and everyone to digest. So essentially, this is the last series or installment of the Women in Retirement Education project. And it gives me such delight to have Gianna here, who is going to be facilitating the session on creating generational wealth. Gianna is one of the people I've been seeing in the financial planning industry, whether it's at Congress or whether it's at the ACT chapter events. And in the corner of my mind, I always thought, this is definitely someone I would love to collaborate with. And I'm so delighted that you took the time to be here today. I think there's so much that we're going to learn from you. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about creating generational wealth. It's an important topic because, we get so immersed in the day-to-day grind of life that we don't necessarily think about the strategies that need to be put in place to ensure that the next generation is financially taken care of as well. So Gianna is the principal financial advisor at Thompson Wealth. So the who's who in the financial planning zoo. And she specializes in investment advice, business succession planning, and comprehensive financial strategies, not just for individuals, but also for families to build wealth. We're so excited to have you here, and we look forward to, what you have to share with us. So I'll hand over to you.
It's been shared yet?
No, not yet.
my sister. You Danielle. She's all the way from New
Yeah,
Zealand.
there she is. That's sweet.
That's a bit weird to see you there. All right, here we go. Can everyone see that? Yes. Awesome. All right. Yeah, creating generational wealth. Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Thompson. As and Dr. Bomakazi, that's how I pronounce it, that's it. I mentioned, I'm Canberra based, and before we get on, it's not financial advice to take, okay? Maybe to Nazalia, she's actually a client. But yeah, today's just for education and entertainment purposes. So just a bit of a disclaimer there. Let me try to meet these people as they come in.
No, don't worry about it. I'll admit them.
All right, so Thompson Wealth is my business, been running for about 6 years now. I provide advice to high income individuals and families, generally in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I have been giving peace of mind about their future. I have been in the financial planning industry for about 20 years. So I've worked for a couple of super funds. I've been a financial advisor at an A&P firm at a West Super, and been running my own gig for about 6 years. I studied the Bachelor of Finance here at UC as a mature age student while working full time, definitely before kids when I did that. So it's a really honour to be invited here to chat with you all today about wealth and all that kind of stuff as well. I started my business. So my business, Thompson Wealth, is actually part of my family legacy as a generational wealth. I've actually started it when Mum passed away from breast cancer around about 8 years ago, received an inheritance and left the employment world and started Thompson Wealth. So, generational wealth and creating all that kind of stuff and your legacy is what I'm living and breathing in my own life as well. What is it that what does generational wealth mean to you? Someone says generational wealth. Feel free to put something in the chat for people online too.
Just passing wealth on through generations.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Sorry?
To add to that, it's just not only passing, it's creating, maintaining, and increasing. Because what value today, in 10 years' time, it will value less. So you have to create significant today, so you have some value for future.
Yeah, so it's creating that long-term wealth and making sure it's being passed down in the way that's going to your intended beneficiaries instead of being, going to someone else or being rubbed up all in tax, whatnot too. So is there anything in particular you guys want to learn today? Is there anything in particular? We're just here for the fun.
I just want to know different stream of wealth creation.
That's a good one.
That today. Yep. Awesome. So we're going to touch on a few things. Obviously, what generational wealth is, how to build wealth, of course, how to help the next generation before you die, how to protect your wealth from asset dilution, and ensuring it's actually received by your intended beneficiaries. Okay. What else there is to know? Leveraging on professional advice. So we're all experts in our own field. So we'll touch on that in item 4. And item 7, everyone loves freebies. There's some after talk goodies after the session too. And that's what the little thing in the middle of the table is for. Okay. Welcome. So in my view, there's 3 pillars of generational wealth. Okay. So you've got the wealth, so the strategic investment building, investing early, diversification, and investing in what we call growth assets, so typically things like shares of property. We then have financial education and family values. So that's really, really important because your kids learn from you. Or if you think, what are you learning from your own parents when it comes to money and wealth? So that's a big factor, and we'll talk about that today. And obviously the estate planning to ensure your wealth is distributed your attending beneficiaries. So, so creating generational wealth involves establishing financial security and prosperity that can be passed down from one generation to the next. And it includes strategies like wise investments, business succession planning, real estate, shares, financial education, ensuring that future generations have the resources and knowledge to build on the legacy that you're building as well. So to understand and implement what we're going to chat about today, families and your families and, teach your parents or teach your kids can achieve long-term financial stability and success, providing a lasting foundation for your future generations to come as well. So we're going to touch on all three of these things today as well. Before we kick off, let's do a bit of an exercise and just to help you understand why it's important to you. What is generational wealth important to you? And because when, like in my business, so before clients, officially engage me as their advisor, we actually sit down for an hour and a half. It's called a 90-minute discovery session. And we go through these 4 L's: live, love, learn, legacy. Okay. So think about your life, right? So in 10 years' time, how old will you be? Okay, so yeah, that. Is there anywhere that you'd rather be living? So it could be in Canberra, or it could be, living in your own home, upsizing, downsizing, anything you would love to do. So it could be in your career, travel, spending more time with certain people. It could be, love to provide a house deposit to your kids or something like that if you have children. Anything you'd like to be learning over the next 10 years, maybe finish your education, probably starting some new education. But most importantly, what we're going to chat about today. So if you're no longer here, how would you like to be remembered? And what do you not want to happen with the money that you're passing down? Like these, the creating generational wealth, it's about passing it down to future generations. It's something you don't want to happen there, as well as estate planning wishes and structures. So today we're going to focus on the legacy part. Why is generational wealth important to me? This is my family. Well, this is my parents and who's online there. Sorry, Danielle, I have to pin you out there. Sort of an old photo. I'm living and breathing this. Next month, we're actually having a group family session. I'm the oldest of 4. They're my siblings behind there, because my father and mum in their own right had created, generational wealth for us children. Mum has since passed away from breast cancer a few years ago. And so we're meeting with, as a family, meeting with Dad's financial planner, his accountant, he's a lawyer, to nut it all out. So I'm living and breathing. There's kind of nuances with some of this too. Not everyone can be on the same page. Money can make people do funny things. All right. So we're trying to work out, how are we going to distribute the generational wealth in the most appropriate way. And I've got 2 kids too, 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. So passing it down to my kids as well. So I'm going to now touch on how to build wealth, how to create your own personal wealth and generational wealth. So when clients come to me for the very first time, often or not, they're thinking about strategy. Like, should I put money into super? Should I buy this property? Should I buy or sell these shares? Should I do this? Should I do that? I'm like, okay, let's take a step back and work out what are you trying to achieve at the end of the day, right? A bit like a project. Look at where you are now and where you want to see yourself in 10 years, going through that live, love, learn, legacy exercise. Because where you want to be, your financial objectives are the most important thing, first of all. The strategy comes secondary. So the strategy about building wealth in super, shares, property, whatever that is, comes secondary. Because you need to make sure the ladder is against the right wall before you start climbing, okay? Because you might, climb the wrong wall and be very expensive to unwind it, or could actually steer you on the wrong path if you don't have the appropriate strategy in place. The appropriate goals in place before you do the strategy. That's what I do, is find your planner. I help clients understand what is it you're trying to plan for before we jump to the advice and the strategy. So I have these 5 steps to financial freedom. I think I actually did an article for UC probably like 7 or 8 years ago, and it's actually still on your website, so I'm pretty impressed by that. Because to build wealth, generational wealth, doesn't happen overnight. It takes time and effort and risk, okay? So what we're going to chat about today is 4 and 5. Okay, 4 and 5. But just to give you an understanding, like, number 1 is understanding what your objectives are, like why you're doing what you're doing, your financial goals, and having a good relationship with money. Good with that. The foundations to wealth, your spending habits are the true foundations to building wealth. Because I have seen it, you know, doctors come in, lawyers come in, they're earning a load of money and they're spending more than what they're earning, and they're behind someone who's earning over 60 grand a year, okay, who's going to build a much better relationship with money. So this is here. But today we're going to focus on here. If you're interested in more the other steps, by all means, book into a 15-minute chat with me after the session as well. Who's seen this chart? Who's heard of Vanguard before? Yeah. So I'm not recommending Vanguard today, people. They've just got some really cool education material. And one of them is this index chart they've just released in 2024. So, and it's a really cool chart just to demonstrate that building generational wealth takes time, it takes discipline, there are risks, time is your friend, and diversification across different asset classes are your friend too. So 10 grand, imagine you got 10 grand and you plonked it somewhere back in 1994, okay? And you've got US shares, Australian shares, international shares, Australian listed property, bonds, cash, CPI rate here. And what it has, it's shown you how that 10 grand has performed right until the 30th of June. Just in the middle, it's a global financial crisis. This is a downturn we had COVID. And the 30th of June. So when it comes to building generational wealth, it doesn't happen overnight. It's best if you can diversify. So not just having all your money locked up in one investment property, for example, having some shares, maybe multiple properties and that kind of stuff. And when it comes to superannuation, you're generally very diversified with that as well. Time. So to invest in what we call growth assets, typically your shares and property, suggested minimum time frame is at least 7, 8, 9 years. So that means if you've got this money and you're thinking in for a house deposit in 2 years' time, you probably want to rethink about putting in some growth assets because investment time frame is really, really important. But yeah, so this is just an example of investing for long-term wealth. Generational wealth does not happen overnight.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
If that's okay. Whenever we sit in these financial workshops, sorry, I've got my back to everyone here. Like we obviously emphasize the importance of investing because, from a long-term point of view, it can provide really significant returns done right.
Yeah.
I then wonder, what about the people who don't know where to start? Because I feel like a lot of these conversations are geared for, people who have already thought about it or have started investing. Well, what is the first step in getting into the investment game, building an investment portfolio?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so the first step is understanding why you want to invest, like what your financial goal is. Are you trying to, because you want to retire at age 45, or are you trying to invest more to build up your property deposit sooner to get to your home? Like, what is your objective first? Because that will help you understand your investment time frame, and it will step to heart. How to probably invest your money. So like if your goal for that money is for a deposit, in a couple of years' time, you're probably not going to put it in because it's such a longer investment time frame. So, but if you're interested in shares and you don't have much, you can tackle it. There's lots of ways to invest online, through apps and whatnot. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just give it a go.
Something. Do you mean like the CommSec or the Comp? I know, like CBA, right? They have that CommPocket.
Yeah, there's
those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's lots of different apps. Okay, just give it a go. Doesn't have to be perfect. And when you've got enough wealth that you can warrant, obviously, financial advice and that kind of stuff, by all means, we can put in place professionally managed advice. And I'll touch on that again in a second too. But you can just give it a go. But education is really important. Listen to podcasts, read books, chat with your friends, which is another slide that we're going to chat about too. So property. Who's heard of negative gearing? Who knows what negative gearing is? Anyone heard the term negative gearing? Yeah, probably have. So negative gearing, so when you have property, right, you've got tenants paying you rent. And usually when you buy property for the first time, you're going into debt. And there's costs to have property. So you've got to pay some land tax rates, probably a property manager to manage the property. So negative gearing means that the expenses to keep that property are more than the rental income that you have. So like rental income may be 10 grand a year. It's costing you 30 grand a year to keep the property. So you're out of pocket 20 grand a year. That 20, it's a negative to keep property because you're negative 20 grand a year. Usually it's great. It can be used for tax purposes, which I probably won't go into heaps today. But some people love it because they get some money back on their tax return, but you're still out of pocket at the end of the day. And just when it comes to building long-term generational wealth, just make sure that you're in a property that's going up in value, because you can actually go backwards very, very quickly. It's negative gearing property. Look outside your hometown. I quite often see clients with investment properties and they buy in their local town, whether it's Canberra or whatnot too, because of the peace of mind and they're comfortable with that. They know the area. But there's a lot of amazing growth areas within Australia. And like for our clients, we introduce them to buyers agents if they need help finding the ideal investment property somewhere in Canberra as well. Bricks and mortar, like property isn't safe. Your bricks and mortar, yes, you can touch it, you can feel it. But, you know, it's you know, you could get bad tenants, the rates could go down, so the rates could go up. There's all these things that could happen with property that would impact it. So it is a growth and risky asset. And again, before you buy a property, understand why you're doing that. So is it in retirement, do you need additional retirement income? If that's the case, so you're probably going to buy an investment property that's got more higher income, so dual occupancy or NDIS properties, or if you're in growth phase, you know, you're young and in growth phase, you know, then you're probably going to focus on more capital growth. And what I do with clients, particularly if they're nearing retirement, we look at how the property as an asset class is impacting their overall retirement goals. Because sometimes the retirement, the rental income for the property isn't enough to meet all of your retirement needs. So we have a chat about, do you think we need to sell this property to release some additional equity? So yeah, property is great. Don't get me wrong, but just have a think about why you want to buy property in the first place before you work out your property strategy. Shares. Shares are great because you probably don't need as much money as a property to get into the share market. You know, you can, there's lots of apps online, whatever, where you can just dabble in and give things a go. You know, you can do direct equity, like you can work out which companies to buy and sell. That's not my style of investing. At Thompson Wealth, we invest clients' wealth through professionally managed accounts like ETFs. Has anyone heard of an ETF or exchange traded fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably like it's been quite popular for younger clients, particularly if they want like something that's just indexed, low cost way of getting into the market. Managed funds look very similar to ETFs, by the way. Managed portfolios are just another way, a bit more transparent with how we invest. You can borrow to invest in shares too. So what's been a popular strategy for my clients, if they're in the home and they've got a fair bit of equity in there, then we actually draw some of that money out to invest in shares. And that's called gearing, which has pros and cons of that too. A really cool way to build wealth in shares or whatever ETF that you've chosen is to invest regularly every single month.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a set and forget sort of way. Work out how much you can afford from your cash flow to invest into the portfolio every month. Automate it so you don't have to think about it. And that's called dollar cost averaging. And that's a really cool way to better compound the investment return that you get from your little portfolio over time. Don't try to time the market. Yeah. Don't say, oh, I'm just going to wait for another GFC, or, oh, the market's down, or, oh, I might sell the cash. Don't. Because you're better off just being in the market and just having it simple and just automated, you know, investing every month than trying to time it, because more often than not, you're going to get it wrong. So, yeah.
Please feel free to ask questions. I feel bad being. It's all right. What are your thoughts on REITs? Or is it REITs? Real estate investment. Real estate investment.
Yeah.
Because I know you talked about, you know, like property, obviously, you know, if interest rates go up, it becomes that much more difficult, you know, to pay off a mortgage. You also want to be looking at various like passive income streams, right? So this is something I think about, that if I don't necessarily have the funds to invest in an apartment for investment purposes, then REITs I think are an alternative, but I'm just curious to see what you think of them as a way for someone who is interested in diversifying their portfolio to have access to property, but just in a bundled form.
Bundled up?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. Australian listed property is kind of like one of those examples, right? So it's just a way of further diversifying your portfolio. You can do that through managed funds or ETFs or something like that too. So when I say investing in shares, I'm not just talking about Australian share market. I am typically talking about, investing overseas, maybe the listed property or whatever that too. So there are, and depending on which platform or app that you choose, you can probably find something that's kind of pre-diversified for you. That's probably got that allocation to property and stuff like that in it too. So hope that answers the question.
Totally. There was someone online who asked whether this figure was based on a hypothetical investment or an actual investment portfolio. The Vanguard.
Google it.
Yeah.
Vanguard index chart, and you'll probably find your answer. So it's just 10 grand. And how I think it's for the distributions reinvested,
Right.
and it's just left alone.
Yeah.
And
How it would have performed. How
it would have performed on the 30th of June 2024.
There's a question online, if you don't mind me jumping in while we're here, that do you have any advice on how to invest our super or let super funds do it? So like when it comes to super, Benjamin, and you'll have to correct me if I've paraphrased the question here correctly. Yeah. So is it better to just, let your super fund do the work for you in terms of how it's allocated? Because Benjamin's saying currently I do have some options, example, high growth, sustainable growth, etc.
Yeah, so everyone has a different appetite when it comes to investment risk. So one thing that we do with clients is we actually work out what their risk profile is. So whether they're high growth, really aggressive, conservative or balanced, before I advise them on which investment option to choose in their super fund. So it's very, very different for everyone. Things we'll look at is their experience with investing, how comfortable they are with things going at fluctuates up and down. Just keep in mind with super, the January can't access it before you turn 60. So investment timeframe is really important, which will depend on, would impact how you decide which option is right for you within your super fund. So it's not a one.
There's no one size fits all.
So with super funds, if you don't make an investment option, they do put you in the default investment option. They actually choose one for you, but you actually have choice to change it yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. In our age, and we've got some time before we need to access it, we're much better off putting it in high growth then.
It depends on the individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to say yes.
Yeah. So there's different factors. So investment time frame and that kind of stuff is one big factor when it comes to investing in assets.
Question.
Yeah.
So you talked about point number 4 in the slide before, invest for passive income. What are the strategy or option available for passive income? Because the way I'm hearing it, at the beginning, you put your money in, it would be always negative gearing. So when you're talking about invest for passive income, how will you interpret that? Number 1. Number 2, what option or strategy or you are targeting to invest in for passive income?
Yeah, you've got a slide that focuses on that too. Yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. I think it's probably my next slide. Okay. So when you invest for passive income, talking about just shares and property. Okay. So if you've got you don't always have to have debt when it comes to buying assets. Sometimes you need to get to buy the assets sooner, property and whatever. So passive income means that you've got rental income that's more than the expenses from the property. So you're now not negative geared anymore, you're positively geared. So let's say your rental income is now 30 grand a year. It's only costing you 5 grand a year to keep the property. So you're ahead by 25 grand. That's 25 grand of positively geared passive income. Also from shares. So the income from shares are what we call dividends. So shares of the company profits that you have invested in. So when it comes to building generational wealth, this is where you want to focus on assets. Liabilities, all they do is increase your expenses. Okay, so big debts or big bills, all they do is increase your expenses and shrinks your surplus cash flow to be able to focus on assets. Now let's look at the family home. Do you consider the family home? Do you think it's an asset or a liability?
I'll say liability.
Liability?
It's a liability at the beginning until it become asset.
Yeah, the family home. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a bit of both. Yeah. What else do people think? Anyone online? A or L?
Asset.
Asset?
I think like depends what it's used for. Because in the beginning, like if you're living in the family home, right, there's a lot of expenses, maintenance, rates, taxes. So there's cash coming out, but no cash coming in. And my understanding of an asset is something not that you don't necessarily just own, but you could generate income from its productive use. So if you're just living in the home and there's no, income being generated from its productive use, it's not really an asset in that way.
Pretty much right. Yeah. So a lot of investors consider the family home a liability. The bigger the house, the bigger the cost, right? Because with assets, if you want an asset, it's got to generate some money for you, but you're not renting out the family home. I personally think it can be a hybrid, it's a bit of both, because you can live in the family home, but your home is going up in value. So what we personally do, Greg and I, is we've actually been drawing equity out of our family home to invest in assets. All right. So in my view, you can actually, if it's done well, it can actually be a hybrid.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, a lot of investors think big house, big cost. It's an expense. It's a liability. It's not on the asset sheet. But yeah, so a few tricks there. If you want to turn your home from a liability
For an asset.
towards the asset. Yeah.
What is the NDIS properties? You just mentioned NDIS property, right?
Yeah. So has everyone heard of the NDI scheme? National Disability Insurance Scheme?
Yep.
Yeah, in Australia. So it's a government initiative where they're helping people with disability here in Canberra, all over Australia, I should say. They're houses, built by investors for people on the NDIS scheme, I suppose, to live in. And they're considered a very high income asset because I think just the rent that's being able to come through, because it usually people can stay living in that home for a very long time too. So it's just it's another high income strategy from an investment sense too. When it comes to creating generational wealth, tax planning is also really, really important. Okay, because if you pay high tax, it's going to impact how much you get in your hot little hand as well. So let's say, for example, you've got an asset and it's held personally outside super, and you're generating, just for argument's sake, 96 grand of passive income. All right. So you've got investment property, paying your rent, maybe some dividends or whatever that is you're receiving. Let's say it's outside super under the old tax rules, you're paying 34.5%. Okay. That means that you get to keep 63 grand. Great. However, if you understand how superannuation works, it's a bit of a tax haven, because if that's exactly the same asset was held within super, if you're retired and drawing down an income stream, it's a big fat 0% tax. So you get to keep your whole $96,000. So when we invest clients' wealth, not only do we have to understand what is your objective, like why we're doing what we're doing, but we help them work out how we're going to hold the asset. So just be in your name, jointly held with someone else. Maybe it's going to be with super or a family trust or an entity, because that's going to impact the tax you pay and therefore your net return. Also, when you're creating generational wealth, how you're holding it impacts the tax that your next generation may pay when they receive the money via the inheritance as well.
There was a question online for super. We still pay tax at 15%.
Yes, in accumulation. Thanks for that. So when you're in accumulation phase, like myself, you're still growing, the maximum tax rate is 15%. When you're retired and drawing down income stream, it actually goes, generally speaking, goes from a big fat 0 to 15% to 0% tax. All right. How to help the next generation before you die instead of just relying on inheritances. So I'm a big I find financial education literacy really, really important because your kid's going to learn from you. Like, like, what did you learn from your parents, right? When it comes to money as well.
So it doesn't grow on trees.
So what financial concepts do you think you wish that you learned earlier?
How to invest.
How to invest?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know how to exit because we can invest, we can have a plan, but if we don't know, like, what strategy will you take to have an exit plan? Because you can just keep investing, keep investing, but what, like, what's your exit plan? At what point you know that, well, this is the time you either put all your accumulation and get the benefit out of it or pass it to generation.
Yeah.
So I want to know because lot of time financial advisor, they are more interested to bring people in to invest. They never talk about the invest exit plan, like, so if you have some idea, if you want to share.
Yeah. So what happens when you want to pass the wealth to the next generation? Is that what you mean?
For example, like my goal is to have a multi-million-dollar beautiful coastal property when I retire. See, that's my goal.
Yeah.
So to get that, I'm building my portfolio with some property with small amount because I don't have that much of cash or loan to fund that. So at what point, like I will think, okay, I have this many property, now I can sell it to have wealth to get to my goal.
Yeah, and that's on a previous slide. You've got a tax plan before you get into it. So what is your end game? I mean, is it because we want to try and sell this property in 10 years to do something else with it?
Yeah.
And that will help us decide, well, how are we going to hold that asset when we buy it? Right? Because that's going to impact when you sell it, the capital gains tax that you pay, and therefore the net return that you get. So tax planning is definitely something that we think about once we help clients understand what are we doing, what's the investment time frame, what is the objective goal as well. So tax planning, not just from today,
But tax
at the end as well.
If I sell today, if I sell in 10 years' time, tax would be the exactly same percentage. Tax won't change. If the change is the growth, the amount that growing, because tax doesn't change.
Yeah, so we base it, we provide advice based on the rules and legislation we know today. And we kind of have an idea of how much we hope it's going to be worth in the future, but no one has a crystal ball. Right? But we do help the tax plan for the end game as well as the beginning of it. So just going back to education. So if you don't know much about money, or if money is still really taboo, it's kind of like sex and money, like no one really likes to talk about it, right? So, and think about what your first positive memory was as a kid, with money. And that's the type of things that your next generation will learn from you as well. How often do you discuss money at home? Like with your parents or siblings or friends? Is anyone not much?
Hardly.
Hardly?
I remember as a kid, like,
Yeah.
and when I think about my own financial socialization, I heard all the terrible things. And I think it came from a place of deprivation, of trying to save as much as you can. Things like, again, money doesn't grow on trees, or if something was too expensive. So, it always seemed as if money was this elusive thing.
Yeah.
And when you did get it, like there was this fear of, okay, I mustn't squander this. I have to be responsible.
Can't spend it.
Yeah, I can't spend it, but you do have to let go to receive, right? You do need to spend for investing to accumulate more. So I've found with my own financial socialization, there's so much unlearning I've had to do. And I think, if there was different discussions at home, it would have definitely set me on a different trajectory.
Yeah, and it's like, it's like, oh, mum and dad, they lost so much money in the GFC, their shares went down, the super went down, and, people, their kids remember that. And it's like, well, that's actually not true, and I can prove it. So, and by keeping that mindset can actually impact your ability to feel comfortable taking your risk and growing your own personal and generational wealth too. But also understanding, chatting with your family about what your personal money values are. Because there's no point building all this wealth that you intend to pass on to them. They don't actually understand what your values are and how you actually want to, pass on. So just communicating that. Like when Mum passed away, and we, she told us that, I'm receiving, you're receiving a small inheritance, each 5 of you. This is my wishes. This is what I would love to see you, well, not see, but, if it's what I would love for you to spend that money on. It could be property, and for me, I started a business. So that's why I was like, I want to spend this money that make Mum proud, and that's why I started the business with it. But she communicated with me, we spoke about it as part of her own generational wealth discussion.
I have 2 questions there. Guys, please excuse me. Please forgive me. I'm not the only one who has like negative money associations from childhood, right?
Or most people.
I'm starting to feel like maybe it's just me. But then on the conversation around inheritances, how true is it that, especially for women, I often read up that like inheritances can make such a significant difference in terms of overcoming the financial starting blocks for women. Is that really true? That, for women, like inheritances can really make a difference in terms of advancing their financial goals?
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, then would it not be more beneficial to receive a living inheritance instead of waiting for, and this is going to sound crass, but instead of waiting for your loved one to pass on before you receive the money?
And I suppose part of the family communication.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, do you, and what their values are. And because it can definitely help. I mean, women over the age of 55 are at risk of highest risk of homelessness in Australia. So if they received some early inheritance, it probably would have helped them buy their home and not have to worry about debt and retirement. So absolutely. It's just every family is different.
For sure.
Every family is different. Educate yourself. So Money Smart. I don't know if you heard of Money Smart. It's an ASIC website. Really cool, great, plain English sort of education and free calculators that you can use. So by all means, yeah, and I'm trying to teach my 5-year-old as part of our, generational wealth, teaching my 5-year-old how to manage money because he just loves those little toy cars. And yes, we're going to Big W. No, we're not going to buy you a car today, another car today. So helping him understand that, it's the value of money and it's not just freely given to him. So if you've got tips on how to teach a 5-year-old money, by all means, I'm just learning. I'm just a parent at the end of the day. But we talk about money at home, even with our 5-year-old, just as part of that family education. All right, how to help kids into the property market.
Yeah.
That's a big one, right? So I'm dealing with probably, generally clients in their 40s, 50s to 60s. So a lot of the conversations we have is, particularly if they've got younger clients, is do you want to help your kids in the property department in the future? And when they do, a lot of them want to actually gift a property deposit. Okay, so and so we do financial modelling to whether they can afford that, and I just educate them. So look, let's look after your retirement first. Okay, if there's any money left over, then think about that too. That's quite costly, actually forking out money, to help with a property deposit. Another one that I have seen, and clients want it, I just try to probably talk them out of it, to be honest, is buying the property with their kids as like joint tenants or tenants in common. So actually buying the property with them. The reason why I'm not a huge fan, every situation is different. So for some situations it works perfectly. But, if you're buying a property of someone, you're locking that wealth in the asset with that person. And I don't know whether they're going to pay you rent or something like that for going a lot of your equity away. When the property gets sold, you're going to trigger, you're personally paying capital gains tax and that kind of stuff too. So it could be quite tricky if they're not paying the mortgage. Does that mean you're going to pay the mortgage as the parent? I think it can be a bit tricky, but if you really want to do it, just put a really good proper plan in place and again, clarify why you want to do that in the first place. A not so costly way to help your kids in the property market is guarantor. Who's heard of a guarantor? Yeah. So a guarantor, let's say mum and dad have a home and they've got some equity in the home and you've only got 5 or 10 deposit to buy your own home. So what your parents can do is say, okay, well, I'm guarantor the bank the extra 10%. So you don't have to pay what they call lender's mortgage insurance, which is like the insurance type thing. So the bank's going, great, okay, so that gives us a bit more security and we're going to lend your kids some, you know, the house and that kind of stuff. It is risky though, because if the kids don't pay the mortgage, then the bank's going to come after you for all that money. But it's just a way that, you know, if you trust your kids and to help them in the property market without having to, you know, forking out money, being a guarantor, and you can take your name off as guarantor as soon as the value of their home has gone up and they don't need you on there anymore. So, yeah, it's a really, I suppose, it's becoming quite a popular way for the parents to help their kids in the property market by being guarantor and not having to fork out thousands of dollars for an actual property deposit. Another not so costly way is to actually pay your kids' lender's mortgage insurance. So it's 10 grand because they don't have the 20% deposit and they're going to be hit with this additional lender's mortgage insurance. And it's actually, I think, what my dad did. My first one. Bought my first property in Watson. He paid my lender's mortgage insurance just to help me out a little bit. So yeah, it's different ways to help out depending on what your capacity is, of course.
You adopt me.
But, you know, there are ways for first home buyers to get into the scheme and, you know, the first home guarantee scheme. So if you're a first home buyer and you've got your 5%, the government will actually guarantee the extra 15%. So you don't get hit with that lender's mortgage insurance. So that's just another way, I suppose, of educating your kids that, you know, if you only got the 5%, there's actually another way that you can get in there without lots of that help. So I just always remind clients that ensure that you have your own comfortable retirement first.
Yeah.
Particularly women. I find that women, you know, in retirement, they love their kids. They've got this very giving nature. And I have seen a few times where they're like, I want to help my kids get into the property market. I just want to, and they're trying to let go of all this money, this superannuation they have access to. And I'm like, if you do that, you're going to struggle in retirement. Right? So really important to put your retirement first. Some other rules. Oh yeah, if you have an investment property, you want to transfer it to someone else, like your kid down the track, you're essentially selling it to them on paper, and you can trigger capital gains tax and stamp duty. So again, you know, if a parent is buying a property with the plan to give it to their child later on, we need to think about kind of stuff right in the onset about how that tax will impact them.
May I ask that last point about it triggering CGT and stamp duty? Is that in if they're still alive, like as in I'm passing it on to you, or upon death?
Life, sorry.
And if it's like an inheritance and that child's been listed as a beneficiary, is there still CGT and
Yeah,
stamp
it
duty?
depends whether the property is being sold or not. Depend on what's been happening, whether tax is going to be.
Okay.
Chen,
What is the tax obligation on the property giving? The deposit property giving.
Sorry,
The first point of that.
Gifting, yeah.
gifting.
property deposit.
What is the tax obligation for the giver?
Nothing.
So,
So if you only gift your child $50,000 to help
Yeah.
with the property deposit,
yeah, so you have to pay tax for that.
no. That's just a gift. You just transfer the money to their account.
I thought you're not allowed to give more than 10,000 within 3 years or so.
Yeah, that's essentially gifting rules, which we'll touch on in a second.
It's not the tax rule.
No, it's not tax rules. It's a so if you're on the Centrelink age pension in retirement, there are rules around how much you can gift to people before it's going to impact your age pension.
Right.
And that's 10,000 per year, maximum 30,000 over.
So you can give any amount to your kids.
Yeah, you can gift $500,000 if you want. You know.
You have to declare in the tax thing.
Pardon?
Do you have to declare in your tax form that you give to, because they always ask the question that have you given how much to your children or something in a tax form?
When you're gifting a property deposit, it's literally you're giving that, you're transferring that money to them. There's no sort of time.
You don't need to declare that.
Not that I'm aware of, but obviously they can check to their accountant about what needs to be declared on their tax return. But it's usually just a gift. It's literally just fine. Like
I thought I remember.
you want to buy a car, 30 grand, and here's a gift of 30 grand to buy a car. It's just a gift.
I read somewhere when I was doing my tax form, it asked whether you have given like gift to somebody else.
Yeah, there's probably different circumstances, but we're just talking about cash, just transfer.
I think someone just put in online that it's usually the recipient who has to declare.
Possibly.
Yeah, so
Yeah, but we're just talking about giving it away as part of the generation.
It also depends that as they receive as income, in this income, it's going to be taxed and they got to pay tax.
But this is not income. This is not a lump sum. This is just it's 100 grand to help with your house deposit. It's not.
Just a question on before the slide, that first home buyer grant, that government giving 5%, right, incentive for the first home buyer. What are the incentive for not first home buyer but investor from government or ATO?
To buy a property with less than 20% deposit.
Yeah, what's the, yeah.
Just getting yourself in the market sooner than having to wait until you save 20% deposit, in my view. So if you want to buy an investment property, okay, you're not a first home buyer, you will still get charged lender's mortgage insurance, generally speaking, depending on if you don't have a 20% deposit. Okay. But some people are happy to pay that lender's mortgage insurance to get into the market sooner because they see the property market going up. So like, well, we can get to the market sooner, in their view that the value of their house is going to go up quick enough to quickly recoup that 10 grand lender's mortgage insurance they booked out for.
So there is no incentive available from ATO or government for investor.
If you're talking about maybe from the
So like why the impacts, like, for home buyer, of course, they're getting 5% discount or.
they need to live in the home if they do that too.
Yes,
It's a different
and
type.
But because from the tax perspective, I haven't seen any incentive for investor from government or from ATO. Do you have any insight on it?
Maybe, I mean, it's probably, so I don't think I'm quite understanding your question. So it's, if
So my question is there any incentive available not for first home buyer, but for investor to get into the property or any other sort of investment?
They're only eligible for people who are first home owner. If you're using for investment.
yeah, there's no other,
Yeah.
are you talking about are there any government incentives to
Yes.
help? Not that I'm aware of, no. I mean, that negatively gearing thing, which is probably a different conversation, probably can in some sort of way. But no, it's just you as the investor, you want to try and get to the market a bit quicker, so you're happy to pay that insurance. Now, obviously, parents wanted to invest in shares as a bit of a gift for the future generation or for the kids. So again, there's platforms that some investors do. Just be mindful that kids under the age of 18 do pay higher tax than as adults. So I think the tax rate from memory is what, $416. I could be wrong. If you're under 18 compared to the tax-free threshold as your adult, which is around about 20 odd grand. So and some parents actually set up portfolios in their own name, but then you just be mindful that you are paying tax on all the distributions when you have the money invested in your own name. But it can be a really great way to get them a bit more involved and probably just part of the education about, okay, which companies do you want to invest in and can have comfortable with investing for the volatility and all that kind of stuff too. So it can work really, really well. But, probably one of my favourite ways to help if you want to get exposure to, the shares of the market, but for kids, like, for example, just setting up a portfolio for parents because they want to invest and have 150 grand to give to their child when they turn 25. And so we're actually using an investment bond to help with that.
Can I ask? We had a question we were debating in class earlier this week, right? Say, for example, there's a kid who's 17 years old. Let's say maybe they work in the family business, they earn some income.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to get taxed. They're going to get taxed on that income that they receive, right?
Yeah.
Do they also pay the 2% Medicare levy?
I
I know it's a tax, like it's a,
don't know, actually, as a 17-year-old.
yeah. Because if they're being taxed on it as if they were earning an income,
Yeah.
must they also then contribute that 2% Medicare?
Yeah, I'm
Sure.
not sure. Probably the accountant's probably best for that one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, not sure, sorry. Who's heard of investment bonds?
Well, I've heard of
Investment
bonds.
bonds?
So you mean the treasury bond and index bond?
No, very quite different. But I know the word bond can be quite confusing. So an investment bond is like a really cool tax vehicle. I think it's not used as often as much as I think people should. I think it's just a great strategy. So imagine that you've got this box, right? And you're buying a good, high growth diversified portfolio or something in there. If you had that portfolio in your own name, then you're paying marginal tax rate on that. Okay, so you're responsible for doing tax returns and whatnot. But in the bond, the maximum tax rate that you're paying is 30%. And that 30% will actually reduce when you have things like franking credits and that kind of stuff. So after setting up an investment bond for a client, and the way we've structured it, they're only paying around about 12% within their investment bond. There's also investment bonds, which are also called education bonds. So it's kind of like they've got this scholarship thing underlining it. But what happens is when you're drawing that money out of the bond to pay for education expenses, that 30% tax rate actually gets refunded as education benefit. So it's a really cool way of building generational wealth to help them with education in a tax effective way, but you're also investing in growth assets instead of just setting up a separate bank to save for them. So it's a really popular strategy we're doing for some clients. Investment bonds are also a really great way if you want to, have money set aside. And if you were no longer here, the bond can actually keep on going in the name of the child, and it can vest at their age that you've actually nominated for example, age 25. And when kids receive it, and let's say they're no longer financially dependent on you, that kind of stuff, they actually receive the benefit from the bond tax-free as well. Whereas if it's in super, they actually pay tax. So it's a really cool tax planning, estate planning strategy. It's actually been, so when I meet with clients and say they've got some blended families and we're trying to tidy up their estate plans, and they've got to probably some like maybe kids from a former relationship or something like that, and they're worried that their estate may be contested after they've passed away, then we've actually set up some investment bonds. And the way we've set it up is like, okay, well, when that person's passed away, the money within those bonds goes to the children tax-free, and it does not form part of the estate whatsoever. So it actually bypasses it.
Yeah.
Completely not risk-free, but it's just one way to try and help manage the estate planning if they think for whatever reason their estate may be contested because there may be some conflicts about people owning over money. So it's just another way of helping your generational wealth get distributed to your intended beneficiaries.
And there's always like arguments, but unfortunately, I think death triggers something crazy in people. Where family dynamics really shift the loss of a loved one. I don't know whether it's the grief or
grieving, it's money.
Yeah.
Mum and dad will, so yeah, absolutely. It's just, that's just why estate planning is so important, right? It's so important. And which we're going to touch on in a second, and we are nearly finished. I don't know if you've heard this saying. I heard this a while ago. Has anyone else heard it?
I've never seen this. This is cool.
First generation builds it, second generation builds on it, third generation spends it. So this is where educating your clients, sorry, not your clients, your kids, family values, having those discussions at home, talking to them about what you hope and wish that they would do with the money, this beautiful legacy that you've, built so hard for, because more often than not, most parents don't want their kids to swindle their money away and, travel and, buy Ferraris and whatnot too. So it's, there too. Because now we're going to talk about how to protect your wealth from asset dilution and ensure it's intended by your beneficiaries. I also heard a lawyer that I know quite well. She's an estate planner, and she found this stat. Don't ask me to quote where the stats from. I've got no idea, but I can probably find it if you want to. Only 25% of us Aussies have valid and up-to-date estate plans. Yet 100% of us die. I don't care how old or young that you are, everyone in this room should have a will.
25% have a
Valid
Valid.
wills.
okay.
Just not only a quarter of us, okay? Yet all of us pass away. So I just find it so, so important just to meet with a lawyer, even if it just paid a couple $100 for whatever reason, just get it done and get it done properly. Depending on what and how money is distributed in the estate, capital gains tax is usually payable by the estate if it's sold, okay, depending on what's kind of happening to, and the cost base of that capital gain can be passed on. There's a few things, except if you're a non-Australian resident. So if you're living overseas, like Danielle, I know you're here, living overseas, and you're receiving money through an estate, generally speaking, capital gains tax is not triggered, but it can actually be triggered if you're a non-Australian resident. So against the importance of having, understanding your estate plans are, you pass on your will to the next generation. Testamentary trusts are just, I don't know, has anyone heard of a testamentary trust?
Yeah.
It's a bit of an estate planning tool. So just Google it. I probably won't have time to discuss it today, but it's just a really cool way of providing some acts of protection tax planning. So for example, if you're concerned that you want to pass on your generational wealth to your son or daughter, but you're worried that one day if they get divorced, then your wealth will kind of form part of that family pool, then the testamentary trust may help to alleviate that problem as well. And superannuation, okay, it can be taxed. So let's say you're over the age of 18, no longer living at home, no longer financially dependent on mum and dad. You're probably going to pay some tax on the money that you receive through this super fund, depending on, compared to if you were, 16, living at home so that you sort of small and whatnot. So again, tax planning when it comes to generational wealth transfer is really, really important. And for clients, we actually do some flow charts for them just so they can visualize what their estate plans actually look like. Testamentary trusts, tax planning. Just another tip that I've seen work really well. So let's say if you create this generational wealth and you want to gift a bit of a deposit to your kids, let's say $30,000, you can actually gift it, or you can actually put a loan agreement in place. So you can see a lawyer, it's not going to be super expensive, it's like 1 or 2 page document, and just saying, okay, I'm actually technically lending you this $30,000. So the event of you actually, let's say your marriage breakdown, or you lose your job, or whatever that is, that 30 grand comes back to me. Okay, so it's just one way of just trying to protect that generational wealth when you're trying to pass it on to people.
So you gift it to your kid and then you tell them you're loaning it.
Well, so you could say, look, I never want this money back.
Okay.
But just to help protect that wealth from being like taken from someone else. For example, if they go through a relationship breakdown and they're going through a divorce, whatever.
Right. And then they
That
partner.
loan agreement, that 30 grand has to go back to mum because we actually have a loan agreement. Yeah. Superannuation, again, can be taxable depending on who's receiving it. So here is actually to put a tip for the end of the session. Just Google binding death benefit nomination and put the name of your super fund after it, and put in place a nomination, because without this, your super fund will decide who gets your super fund and the life insurance policy held within your super fund when you die. And it may not be who you want to go to. So you can fix that by putting in place a binding death benefit nomination. Not non-binding, which is what a lot of people do, that you can do it online, a binding one. This has to be signed by you and also witnessed and signed by 2 other people on the same day. And depending on who receives it, can actually pay tax on it too. And also, just as another tip, if you're living with a new partner and you don't have one of these binding death benefit nominations in place, per legislation, the trustee will probably declare your spouse or your boyfriend you've been living with for 3 months as your spouse and receive all the money. So just a bit of a tip, just to fix it up if that's not what your intention is.
The drama.
Yeah. How much time do we have? Sorry.
We're actually almost out of time, but if we could wrap up in the next 5, that would be okay too.
Okay, thank you. Look, again, I can speak for this, for a long time, running a business. A big thing that we do is help business owners protect their wealth within the business, particularly what we call buy-sell agreements and that kind of stuff. Look, if you're running a business, come and have a chat with me and I can tell you all about that stuff too, because it's quite important. All right, so what else is there to know? Okay, we're nearly at the end. Life insurance. Who's heard of life insurance? When it comes to building generational wealth, it's a really, if you want your loved ones to inherit your wealth, but there's debt against it, like debt against a property or debt against shares, a life insurance policy can help pay off that debt and they receive it sort of debt-free. Otherwise, the debt's going to go to them as well.
Wait, what? I'm sorry. You said the debt could go to the beneficiary as well.
Absolutely. Asset and the debt, yeah. the debt doesn't go away on death. So so either they have to sell the asset.
Wait, can you give an example of like when debt would be transferred on the death of?
Yeah, so let's say if you have a $500,000 house and it has $300,000 worth of debt,
Mm.
that debt doesn't get forego. So as part of the estate, you need to work out, okay, is this person going to inherit the asset plus and continue to pay the debt? Or if they can afford to, they probably need to quickly sell the property. But if you have a $300,000 life insurance policy, the estate could actually use that to pay off the debt, and then their loved ones can actually receive that $500,000 house debt free.
Can I ask that? Okay, say for example, if we're looking at the house, do you inherit the debt because you're inheriting the asset? Or if you no longer want to inherit the asset because of the debt, do you still have to absorb it because someone has to pay for it?
The estate has to work out what's going to happen with the debt.
Right.
The bank's going to go, this person still owed me $300,000.
Yeah.
So as part of the estate, the executive's going to work out whether they're going to sell the asset or whether someone can keep paying it and that stuff. Yeah. And then life insurance can also help, like if it's an imbalance. So like if it's a very sort of lumpy estate, but a life insurance policy can help even it out as well. So like some clients, they've got 2 kids. Well, he had 2 kids from a previous relationship and he's building wealth with his new partner. And we've just put in place, $300,000 life insurance policies per person. To say, okay, they're going to be looked after the kids' life insurance policy, then they could just kind of just help the estate planning with his life as well. Gifting rules for Centrelink. So kind of mentioned before, if you're in retirement and you're receiving a full or part age pension, you need to be very careful about how much you gift. So the rules around Centrelink gifting rules is $10,000 per year, maximum $30,000 over 5 years. So this would just impact how much Centrelink pension you receive. So generally speaking, the less money that you have, the more age pension that you get.
Mm.
But if you've gifted too much, and even though your bank account shrunk, Centrelink will still pretend that you have that money and then won't shrink your age pension as much. So that's called deeming rules and gifting rules. Just something to be mindful of. And lead by example. Your kids are going to learn from you. That's probably the most important gift you can provide when it comes to building generational wealth. And just always put your comfortable retirement first, instead of just focusing on trying to pass on the family home to the next generation. And just to yes.
Can we have life insurance under super?
Yeah.
Yes, there's various ways to own it. Super, personally, or otherwise. Yeah.
And who does tax planning? Is it tax agent or financial advisor?
Tax agent. Well, a bit of both. We are licensed tax agents at the end of the day, but when it comes to actual tax returns and that kind of stuff, that's definitely an accountant.
And you can claim that as a tax deduction, right? If you consult a tax agent.
A tax agent?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the fees I pay my accountants have been tax deductible to me.
So if you're a financial advisor and a tax agent and I come speak to you, can I claim then?
That is actually,
I think tax deduction.
That's actually something in legislation at the moment that's been a bit of a grey area. But part of financial advice fees relating to tax advice and ongoing investment advice are generally tax deductible to people.
Yeah.
So it depends on but sooner you start the stuff, the better. Too busy, not now, later. I hear it all the time. The best time to do it is now. So that's it from me. Yep, I'm Joanna Thompson from Thompson Wealth. Feel free to just update my website. Let me know what you think with it too. We have our family, our office in Curtin, in Canberra, but we also meet with clients online. I've got clients Australia-wide, so you don't have to be in Canberra to reach out. After talk goodies. So on the table here, we've got some after talk goodies. So there's some freebies. So we've got some regular wealth help checks. We've got some 10 expert tips to build wealth and save on taxes, and a really cool smart retirement calculator so you can still see how you're tracking for retirement. And also a 15-minute chat too, because you could be only a few tricks and tips away from building more wealth. So by all means, if you want to have a chat, please feel free to fill out the little card and give it to me today, and the team will be in touch. For those who are online, we'll reach out to you as well, obviously to give you the same offer. We'll send you an email or something like that. That's it from me. I'm Joanna Thompson, and thanks everyone for joining me. Thank you. Pardon?
Is there any book you recommend to read? Books.
Books. Yeah. I listen to podcasts. Yeah, but no, I've got quite a few.
You can
Can I
email
email
me? Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for the wonderful presentation.
That's all right.
Really valuable and a lot of questions got answered.
Yeah.
So please allow me to just, again, if we could give a round of applause to Diana. Honestly been a 2 or 3-part installment because it was just so much to unpack. For example, I didn't think about the fact that there's pillars when it comes to creating generational wealth. So that's something I didn't know. You shared a lot of useful tips, hacks, strategies to start thinking about. And really my key takeaways was that it's so important to be proactive. If you don't take that first step in asking for help and reaching out and speaking to a financial advisor, whom we now know can also be a tax agent, whom we now know you can claim a tax deduction for that, is critical. There's tax planning strategies that could be implemented. And that it really starts with the basics, right? And at the bottom of that pyramid, you shared that if you can't do the basic things really well, it becomes that much more difficult to start thinking about the more intense or higher grade concepts when we're talking about, estate planning, investments, etc.
Yeah.
So some of the things you talked about as well that resonated with me was just the various ways in which you can build wealth and revisit the strategies you put in place for passive income, that it doesn't have to be the traditional financial tools that we know of, that there's so many different things you can use. If you're too scared to invest in specifically shares, there's EFTs or managed funds that you could explore. I never heard of education bonds or investment bonds. I know what a bond is, but looking at it from that perspective and just some of the tax strategies that can be applied in that regard. And yeah, I think also one of my key takeaways is you spoke about, the financial socialization and how we talk about money to our families, to our children, and how that can inform our financial attitudes. I think that's so critical. And one of the things I really hope I will encourage everyone who came today and the attendees online is to keep these conversations going, whether it's within your families, amongst your friends, whomever you have, access to in your network. You never know what someone doesn't know and what you can do to actually help empower them. Because as the expression says, right, knowledge is power. When you know better, you can do better. And when you do better, everyone around you becomes better too. So I hope
a triple effect, isn't it?
absolutely there's a domino effect to it. So I hope that these conversations won't start and end in this room, and that this has stirred something inside of you to keep these conversations going. Maybe look at your own finances, how you plan, how you save, how you talk to your family about it, how you build your wealth and protect it to pass it on to the next generation. We've gone a little bit over time, and you'll forgive us for that. I hope we can keep these conversations going outside. There's some life refreshments that we have catered for. So please feel free to hang around. I think Gianna might be available for a little bit. I will be here as well. And that being said, Gianna has left little, I don't know what to call it.
Little cards.
Yeah, little cards at the back. Please exploit this opportunity as well, right? Sometimes we know what we need to do, but we don't know how to go about doing it. I think this is an excellent first step in speaking with someone just to, get a feel of where you're at and how you're tracking along. Feel free to do that. Also, I've provided little budget planners for everyone who came along today. So feel free to grab one because like I said, until you can do the basic things really well, you won't master the difficult things. So I'm old school. I like to write down. Of course, all of the stuff is available online. I know that there's so many apps and, software programs that you can use to help you plan. But it's really the little things, starting with your budgeting, right? Being able to identify what your cash coming in is, where you're hemorrhaging money in terms of cash flow. And I think until you can visualize what your financial situation is, it becomes that much easier to take action. I know what my guilty pleasures are. It's even though I have a coffee machine at home, I still enjoy that coffee, somewhere with my friends or after a gym session. But once you can track where your spending habits are, where you're overspending, you'll never be able to find opportunities to save and invest until you're proactive about your finances. So please feel free to grab one. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Feel free to reach out. Most of you have my email address. And until next time.